A blind taste test destroyed everything I thought I knew about steak. The $200 Wagyu ranked dead last. But here's what's really disturbing. The winner cost less than your morning coffee, and the reason why changes everything about how meat is sold. All right, let's break down where your money actually goes when you buy expensive meat. That $50 ribeye at your favorite steakhouse? The restaurant paid maybe 12 to 15 bucks for it. The rest covers rent, the guy cooking it, and profit. You're basically paying $35 for atmosphere and someone else doing dishes. But here's where it gets interesting. The pricing game starts way before the restaurant. Heritage breed cattle grow about 40% slower than commercial breeds. That's months of extra feed, extra care, extra everything. Farmers aren't greedy, they're just trying not to go broke. Then there's actual scarcity. USDA prime beef makes up only 2 to 3% of all graded beef in America. 2 to 3%. That's not marketing, that's math. Speaking of marketing, though, some brands slap a fancy label on regular meat and charge 30 to 50% more. The cow doesn't know it's premium. Trust me. Now, dry aging. This one kills me. When a steakhouse ages your steak for 45 days, that beef loses 15 to 20% of its weight. Just evaporates. You're literally paying for meat that doesn't exist anymore. It's like buying a bag of chips that's half air, except way more expensive. And small farmers? They can't negotiate bulk discounts on feed or vet bills like big operations can. Every extra cost lands directly on your receipt. But here's the thing. Price doesn't always equal quality. And that's where marbling comes in. Marbling. That white fat webbed through your steak like tiny rivers. Here's what actually happens when you cook a marbled piece of meat. That intramuscular fat melts and bastes the steak. From the inside out. It's like having a tiny chef inside your ribeye with a butter baster. Pretty clever design, honestly. Japanese Wagyu cattle? They're basically genetic freaks. Their bodies deposit fat directly inside the muscle fibers instead of around them like American breeds do. It's not training. It's not special massage techniques. It's DNA. The USDA grades beef almost entirely on this stuff. Prime means abundant marbling. Choice means moderate. Select means your steak might need some help. But here's where it gets interesting. Blind taste tests have shown something that'll make steak snobs uncomfortable. Most people can't tell the difference between prime and high choice once you cook that steak past medium. All that extra money, gone at 160 degrees. And more fat isn't always better. I've had Wagyu so marbled it felt like eating warm butter. Not in a good way. There's absolutely a ceiling where luxury becomes greasy. Now here's a twist that confuses everyone. Grass-fed beef costs more but usually has less marbling than grain-finished. You're paying extra for leaner meat. Wrap your head around that one. So marbling matters. But it's not the whole story. What those cattle ate before becoming your dinner? That changes everything. And the difference happens in about 120 days. 120 days. That's all it takes to completely transform how beef tastes. When cattle spend their final 3 to 4 months eating corn and barley instead of grass, something shifts. The fat gets sweeter, richer. That buttery flavor Americans grew up loving? It comes from grain. But here's the catch. Grass-fed cattle need 22 to 26 months to reach market weight. Grain-finished? 15 to 18 months. That's almost a year less feeding, housing, and caring for an animal. Farmers aren't choosing grain because it's evil. They're choosing it because keeping a cow alive for an extra year costs serious money. Now let's talk nutrition, because this is where it gets interesting. Grass-fed beef has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio around 2 to 1. Grain-fed, 6 to 1 or worse. Your body actually notices that difference. And grass-fed contains up to 5 times more conjugated linoleic acid. That's a fatty acid linked to reduced inflammation. Sounds like grass-fed wins, right? Not so fast. Here's a sneaky trick the industry pulls. Many labels say grass-fed, but those cattle still got grain at the end. Only grass-finished means the animal never touched corn. Read carefully, or you're paying premium prices for regular beef with better marketing. Feed represents 60 to 70% of what farmers spend. So every kernel of corn, every blade of grass, shows up in your receipt. I'll be honest, I thought these health rings were a scam. I bought one half expecting to send it back. But 3 months later, it hasn't left my finger. And it does way more than I expected. Sleep, activity, heart rate, recovery and stress, all from one little ring. The thing that helped me most? I realized my afternoon coffee was quietly wrecking my sleep. One small change, cutting it off after lunch, and within a week, I was sleeping like a rock. Now here's why I'm telling you this. Right now the ring's 63% off, just 60 bucks if you grab it through the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. There's a 90-day money-back guarantee if it's not for you, but I'm keeping mine. But what about the animal itself? Because some breeds are literally engineered differently. Red wattle pigs almost vanished completely. By the 1970s, fewer than 200 existed. Now they sell for triple what commercial pork costs. Why? Because they taste like pork actually used to taste. Deep, rich, complex. Not that bland, watery stuff wrapped in plastic at the supermarket. Here's where genetics gets wild. Commercial chicken breeds like the Cornish cross go from egg to dinner plate in 6 to 8 weeks. Heritage breeds? 12 to 16 weeks. That's double the time, double the feed, double the labor, but also double the flavor development. Berkshire pigs carry something special in their DNA. A gene that creates more fat inside the muscle, not just around it. Japanese farmers figured this out centuries ago and specifically imported these pigs. They weren't messing around. And turkeys? This one's almost too weird. Heritage turkeys can reproduce naturally. Commercial broad-breasted whites are so comically oversized, they literally cannot mate without human assistance. Every single one requires artificial insemination. We engineered birds that can't do the one thing nature designed them for. My grandfather would have found that hilarious and deeply sad at the same time. The numbers tell the story. In 1957, a chicken breast averaged 2.8 ounces. Today's commercial birds? Over 8 ounces from the same genetic starting point. We basically created mutant chickens. But breeding for size means sacrificing something else. Efficiency versus flavor. Speed versus depth. It's always a trade-off. Speaking of trade-offs, there's another factor that quietly transforms meat behind closed doors. Aging. This is where time literally becomes money. 90% of American beef gets wet-aged. The meat sits in vacuum-sealed plastic bags for a couple weeks. It's cheap, efficient, and loses zero weight. The flavor? Pretty mild, almost forgettable. Dry aging is a completely different animal. You hang beef in a climate-controlled room for 30, 45, sometimes 60 days. The room needs humidity between 80 and 85%. Temperature stays locked at 34 to 38 degrees. Airflow has to be constant. That equipment alone costs thousands to set up and maintain. And here's the kicker that makes restaurant owners cry. After a month of aging, they have to trim away the entire dried exterior. That crusty bark? Straight into the trash. Another 10 to 15% of usable meat, gone. Combined with the evaporation we mentioned earlier, you're paying for steak that basically went on a serious diet. But what you get back is worth it. Those enzymes spend weeks breaking down proteins into savory amino acids. The result tastes nutty, funky, almost cheese-like. Some people describe it as beef that finally woke up and chose violence. In a good way. There's a practical benefit too. That brown crust when you sear a steak? The Maillard reaction. It happens faster on dry-aged beef because the surface proteins are more concentrated. Better sear, less time overcooking the inside. Wet-aged beef held for 2 or 3 weeks? Most people can't tell the difference from fresh and blind tests. Now about those fancy labels on the package. Those labels on your steak? Some mean everything. Others mean absolutely nothing. Natural sounds wholesome. Like the cow did yoga and meditated. In reality, it just means no artificial ingredients were added after slaughter. That's it. The animal could have lived in a concrete box its whole life, still natural. USDA Organic requires organic feed and outdoor access. But here's the catch. Outdoor access could mean a tiny concrete patio attached to a barn, technically outside. Legally compliant, completely misleading. Certified humane actually has teeth. Third-party inspectors visit farms. They measure square footage per animal. They ban growth hormones. Someone's actually checking. Now let's talk about Wagyu labels because this is where things get spicy. American Wagyu can mean the animal was 1% Wagyu and 99% Angus. There's no minimum genetic requirement. It's like calling yourself Italian because your great-great-grandmother once ate spaghetti. And the product of USA label? This one made me genuinely angry when I learned it. Meat can be born in Australia, raised in Canada, slaughtered in Mexico, then shipped here for repackaging. Slap on that American flag. Completely legal. The strictest certification. Animal welfare approved. It covers everything from birth to slaughter. Independent audits, strict standards, but it appears on less than 1% of meat sold in America. Finding it is like finding a politician who admits they were wrong. So, which expensive cuts actually justify their price tags when you get them home? Here's the thing, nobody tells you about expensive meat. You can absolutely destroy it. That gorgeous marbled ribeye you paid $40 for? Cook it to well done, and you've basically donated money to charity. All that beautiful intramuscular fat that made it expensive? Gone. Rendered out completely once you hit 160 degrees internally. You're left with expensive shoe leather. And Japanese A5 Wagyu? This stuff is so rich that eating a full 12-ounce steak would genuinely make you sick. I learned this the hard way. Ordered a big portion thinking I'd treat myself. Made it through maybe 4 ounces before my stomach staged a protest. It's meant to be eaten in small slices, like 3 ounces, maybe 4. The Japanese figured this out centuries ago. But here's a mistake even experienced cooks make constantly. They forget about carryover cooking. When you pull meat off heat, the internal temperature keeps climbing another 5 to 10 degrees. So that perfect medium rare you're aiming for? Pull it early or watch it sail right past into medium territory. Heritage pork needs patience. Lower heat, slower cooking. That gorgeous fat needs time to render and baste the meat from inside. Rush it, and you're wasting money. The most humbling part? A $2 instant read thermometer will give you better results than any expensive cut ever could on its own. Seriously, temperature control beats premium genetics every single time. So where should you actually buy this stuff? That depends on whether you value convenience or quality more. Supermarket meat has a dirty little secret. That fresh chicken sitting in the case? It probably left a processing plant in Nebraska a week ago, traveled halfway across the country in a refrigerated truck, then sat under fluorescent lights waiting for you. A real butcher shop operates differently. They're breaking down whole animals every few days, sometimes daily. The difference in freshness is something you can actually see. Brighter color, less liquid pooling in the package. But here's where it gets interesting. Those massive processing plants that supply grocery chains, they're running thousands of cattle through every single day. Picture an assembly line moving so fast that individual attention to each cut becomes physically impossible. Efficiency beats precision every time. A skilled butcher working by hand can squeeze 15 to 20% more usable meat from the same carcass. They know which way the grain runs, where to make cuts that maximize tender portions. Automated machines just can't replicate that. And traceability? Your supermarket ribeye might contain beef from 30 different ranches blended together. A specialty butcher can often tell you the farmer's name, maybe even the cow's name if you ask nicely. Now the price gap is real. Costco sells prime beef around 15 to 18 bucks per pound. That same grade at a specialty shop runs $30 to $45. Painful difference. But here's a butcher hack worth knowing. Ask for the cuts nobody requests. Hanger steak, flat iron, terrace major. Speaking of which, does any of this actually matter when you taste it blindfolded? Here's where things get humbling. Texas A&M ran a study where consumers tasted Wagyu alongside regular choice beef. People rated the Wagyu significantly higher. But when asked to identify which was which, total coin flip. They knew one tasted better. They just couldn't tell you which one it was. Professional chefs do slightly better. In blind tests comparing dry-aged to wet-aged beef, trained chefs got it right about 70% of the time. Home cooks, 50%. Literally random guessing. And it gets weirder. Researchers gave people identical steaks but told one group theirs cost more. The expensive steak scored higher every single time. Same meat, same preparation, different price tag, different experience. Our brains are basically scam artists working against our own wallets. When grass-fed and grain-fed beef go head-to-head without labels, preferences split almost perfectly down the middle. No clear winner. All that extra money for grass-fed, and half the people preferred the cheaper option anyway. But here's what actually surprised me. The single biggest flavor factor in blind tests isn't the breed, isn't the aging method, isn't even the price. It's cooking technique and internal temperature. A perfectly cooked choice steak beats a botched prime steak every time. Restaurant studies found something almost embarrassing: the lighting, the music, how the server describes the dish. All of it affected satisfaction scores more than the actual grade of beef on the plate. So, if most people can't taste the difference, when does spending more actually make sense? Let's start with when it doesn't. Pot roast, stews, anything you're braising for 3 hours. Expensive cuts offer literally zero advantage here. Long, slow cooking breaks down tough, cheap meat into fork-tender perfection. That $40 chuck roast ends up identical to the $12 one. Save your money. Ground beef? Only matters if you're eating burgers medium rare. Cook that patty to well done, and premium ground tastes the same as the budget stuff. Your fancy beef just became expensive shoe leather. Here's a money hack that sounds too simple to work. Whole chickens. Buy them whole, break them down yourself. 30 to 40% savings versus pre-cut parts. Same bird, same quality. Just requires a sharp knife and a YouTube tutorial. And those butcher's secret cuts? Chuck eye steak comes from the muscle right next to the ribeye. Similar flavor, half the price. It's basically the ribeye's less famous cousin who didn't get invited to the fancy restaurants. Now, when should you actually splurge? Simple preparations: salt, pepper, screaming, hot pan. Nothing else. That's when quality shines through because there's nowhere for mediocre meat to hide. The law of diminishing returns kicks in hard around $25 to $30 per pound. Every dollar passed that buys you smaller and smaller improvements. You're basically paying for bragging rights at that point. Bottom line, know what you're cooking, know how you're cooking it, then spend accordingly. Your wallet will thank you.